You know, I'm almost lost for words as to how stupid our political masters are. It wouldn't even matter what country or religion or place somebody comes from. If 35, 36, 37, 38,000 people are coming into your country, you don't know who they are. That is an emergency in itself, right? Regardless, if you have an inkling that they are coming from countries that may well be areas of interest to our own intelligence services, and yet they're going to come in on a boat, be given a cup of tea, a warm blanket, and then sent off to the Four Seasons for the next 3 years. I can't think of any other area of life. You know, man alive, I had to produce ID to get into a cinema the other day, but I can jump on a boat and sail to the UK and find myself with a hotel by 6 p.m. and nobody knows who I am. This is the 21st century. There's no area of life you could get away with that in any other respect, in any other place, apart from jumping on a boat and sailing to Dover. You can't make this stuff up. 0344 499 1000. How do we put a stop to international terrorism? We now know that Shamsuddin Jabbar, 42, has been named by the FBI as being responsible for the car ramming attack in the US, which left 15 people dead, at least 35 injured, and that number is likely to increase. This is in New Orleans on the morning of New Year's Day, of course. An Islamic State flag and weapons, including explosives, were found in the rented pickup truck. The FBI are treating the attack as terrorism and believe that Jabbar didn't act alone. Let's get a word on this and discuss this with the former head of National Counter-terrorism Security Office, Chris Phillips. Chris, good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Nice to have you with us. I mean, look, it's the age-old problem. There's a bit of déjà vu going on here. You've experienced this more than most. I listed at the beginning of the programme similar kind of what we now call random attacks, although they appear to be fairly regular. They cease to be that random. But people going about their own business, laying on a beach, going shopping, Christmas Day, at a music gig, walking over a bridge, whatever. These kind of attacks. I mean, how does the West even begin the process of trying to stop that?
Well, I mean, what we're trying to do at the moment, Ian, is fight a war against an idea. And the idea is that we should all be living under strict Islamic law. Now, I don't think that will happen in my lifetime or your lifetime or, you know, our children's lifetime. But there are a lot of people that actually think that we should be living in a completely different way. And unfortunately, we've now come to the point where we've got a lot of people in the UK that feel like that, and a lot of people across Europe and in the US. And of course, with the use of the internet and the ability to influence other people and more people, then we've got to take a strong stand against that. And that's the only way that we can deal with this is to say these views are unacceptable and not acceptable in this country. We've allowed Sharia law to be in some of our cities, and it's just incredibly stupid that we are even stepping back an inch on this.
And it's interesting, isn't it? We talked about the Sharia law story, which I didn't realise started in was it the 80s or the 90s, the first Sharia court in this country? Look, I know they don't deal with, you know, criminal cases and such, but it is a sort of it's a kind of green light, isn't it, that there is another way, acceptable way to live in this country that's different to the one we have.
Yeah, and integration is the key. And unfortunately, there are groups of people who have no intention of integrating.
Yeah.
Many Muslims live quite happily within the UK, quite happily within the legislation. They appreciate the laws and the way this country runs, and want to go for their religion. That's absolutely fine. But when you have a situation where people are deliberately bringing relatives in from another country who don't speak English simply because they want them to come over here and don't want westernized women to be married to, then you've got a big problem, because you've got a big problem that really don't want to live under Western rules.
In terms of where we go with this, I mean, look, you know, what happened in America, as you know better than me, Chris, it was just the latest. I mean, there's been so many of these sort of attacks, the nightclub in Orlando, Charlie Hebdo. I mean, the grim list goes on. We're likely to continue seeing this as the years go on? I mean, do we have to roll over? And as you rightly said, we're trying to battle an idea here. Is this a case of saying, look, we live in a free world, and part and parcel of the price we paid is that once in a while a madman will do something like this? Do we just have to accept it?
Well, 15 years ago, I was talking about this and saying then that this is a generational issue. It's not going to go away in my lifetime, or your children's lifetimes. Our children's children are going to be fighting this problem, but we must not lose this fight, and we must make sure that if we value our way of life, then we make sure that it stands. Yes, we are going to have a terrorist attacks. The internet has made that far worse. This chap, it seems, was fully integrated into the US. He was a soldier, for goodness sake, fighting for a country which then, whatever's happened in his life, he has decided to go rogue and to do this. Now, the interesting thing about this, I think, Ian, is that people are talking about this as being a one-man band attack with a vehicle. This was a multiple coordinated attack planned with guns and with explosives that didn't go to plan because he obviously was stopped by police officers. There are other people involved in this, and I think, the thought of actually running this big show, this big event they got tonight, is a bit of a silly idea when you're still chasing after people out there that want to commit murder.
And of course, over there in Las Vegas, we know there was another incident where a truck exploded outside the Trump Hotel. Is there a relevance that it was the Trump Hotel and the explosives were in a Tesla car? Probably. But the wider question, it seems the FBI are looking at, is whether it's connected to the New Orleans attack.
And that's quite feasible. And I think the big work will be done around the intelligence about this guy and who he's been talking to and who his group are, because that's before you can really go on to living, opening the cities up, you need to find that out and just how big this group is. Because if there are people out there that have made bombs, that have obviously got a bomb factory somewhere, I think a house has caught fire and they think things were put together there, but that's rarely the only location.
Yeah.
All this needs to be dealt with before you start getting the city back to normal. But in answer to your first question, yes, we are going to have to face this. Yes, we're going to have to be resolute, and we mustn't back an inch away because there are people out there that don't like Western civilization and want to get rid of it.
It is as straightforward as that. Listen, Chris, it's always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you, sir. Chris Phillips, former head of the National Counter-terrorism Security Office. Where do we go with this? And it sounds like, even as I asked the question, I'm aware there's a certain amount of futility in answering the question, because it may well be we have to accept that the price of living in a free society, although sometimes it increasingly feels as if we are restricting some of that, but the price we pay, broadly speaking, for living in a Western democracy, a system of governance and existence that is far superior to some of the nutty places on earth that believe the year 1568 or whatever is a far better barometer of how it's best to live. We live in a free world in the West, and that's great. Part and parcel of that, of course, is that once in a while a nut job will manifest in some sort of form, lethal form in these kind of cases. Do we ever stamp that out? Look, if you went around, if you're talking about Islamist extremism, we know that there are too many mosques in this country that are preaching some pretty bad stuff. There was a talkTV investigation around about a year ago, I think, on exactly this. You haven't got to look too far on YouTube and other areas to find some pretty nefarious, bloody dangerous people who are given carte blanche to speak out and do whatever they want in this kind of arena. We know that if you look online, you will see all sorts of people with, I was about to say questionable views, but it's a little more than that. Even if, my point is, even if you got to all those rogue mosques or the back rooms of those mosques, which is where much of this stuff is likely to happen, where people are being taught a sort of different version of events, even if you manage to get beyond that, the nut jobs that were outside the Batley Grammar School calling for, the very least, the jailing of a teacher. I'm sure some of them called for the death of a teacher because he happened to mess around with some cartoons of a prophet. even if you got all of that group of people, the people that were intimidating on motorcycles with a Palestinian flag, all that, I'd scoop a lot of them up. They'd be serving time in the chiller right now. Even if you did that, I'm not absolutely sure you stop the possibility of another New Orleans or another Manchester or another